Most people think vanilla is the boring flavor. In a grocery aisle, that is exactly why it tells the truth. Chocolate can hide things. Cookie mix-ins can distract you. Caramel swirls can make almost anything feel richer than it is. But vanilla has nowhere to run. When a brand wants to look wholesome, premium, old-fashioned, or better for you, vanilla is usually where the promise gets tested. And that matters, because vanilla is also the flavor shoppers trust the most. Parents buy it for kids. Adults buy it because it feels safe. People reach for it when they want the simple version, the classic version, the version that should not require detective work. But that assumption is where the category gets slippery. Ice cream is one of those products that can still feel innocent even when the label is doing a lot of work behind your back. A carton can look clean, sound nostalgic, even use words like natural, homemade, slow-churned, bean, old-fashioned, or light, and still leave you with a product that is more engineered, more padded, or more confusing than the front panel suggests. Not always, but often enough that blind trust is a mistake. And that is the real point of this video. Not to act like every cheaper tub is a scandal, not to pretend one spoonful is a life event, and not to tell you that every premium pint is automatically honest. This is a practical audit, a shopper's audit. The goal is simple. If you stand in front of the freezer and want to know which brands deserve more scrutiny and which ones actually earn confidence, what should you look for? Here are the 5 mistakes people make with ice cream before we get into the brands. First, they trust the front of the carton more than the name of the product. If the words ice cream quietly disappear and the package starts calling itself a frozen dairy dessert, light ice cream, or something softer and more flexible, that is not meaningless. Second, they assume vanilla bean specs equal quality. Sometimes that is real vanilla doing real work. Sometimes it is mostly a visual cue telling your brain to expect craftsmanship. Third, they confuse lower calorie, or lower carb, with simpler. In frozen desserts, those are often opposite directions. Fourth, they stop reading after the first 3 ingredients, when the texture-building system is really what explains the product. And fifth, they think familiarity equals honesty. If a brand has been in the freezer aisle forever, shoppers start giving it extra trust that the ingredient panel may not deserve. So let's use that framework and start with 5 brands I would not give automatic trust to, especially in their most trust-signaling vanilla cartons. The first is Blue Bunny Soft Vanilla. This one matters because it teaches the most important rule in the aisle. Check what the carton is actually calling itself. Blue Bunny's Soft Vanilla is not presented as a classic scoop shop-style indulgence built from a short, dairy-first ingredient deck. It is a soft frozen dairy dessert. That distinction tells you a lot before you even get to the details. Then you read the ingredients and the formula starts to explain the mouthfeel. Skim milk and cream show up early, but so do dextrose, whey, sugar, fructose, coconut oil, glycerin, and a cluster of texture helpers. That is not the profile of a simple freezer staple. It is the profile of a product designed to stay extra soft, extra scoopable, extra forgiving, even when the dairy story is thinner than the packaging mood suggests. And here is why shoppers miss it. The carton still lives right next to ice cream. It still borrows the same visual language. It still promises vanilla comfort. If you are tired, shopping fast, and buying for a family movie night, it feels close enough. But close enough is exactly how trust gaps work in grocery retail. Nobody is saying a product like this is forbidden. The issue is that it sells ease and nostalgia, while asking you not to notice how much the formulation has shifted towards softness, sweetness management, and cost-controlled structure. If you want a dessert that is optimized to be fluffy and easy to scoop, fine. If you think you are buying a straightforward tub of vanilla ice cream, that confidence is doing more work than the label. The second brand I would approach carefully is Breyer's Carb Smart Vanilla. This is where the health halo starts getting loud. A lot of shoppers see a carb-conscious dessert and mentally move it closer to the better end of the freezer. But lower-carb frozen desserts often earn that position through more engineering, not less. Breyer's Carb Smart Vanilla is a frozen dairy dessert, and its ingredient list tells you exactly why. Skim milk and cream are there, but so are maltitol syrup, water, polydextrose, glycerin, coconut oil, whey, soluble corn fiber, emulsifiers, stabilizers, and sweetener support systems that are doing serious structural labor. That does not make it evil, it makes it specialized. And specialized products should not be confused with transparent products. That is the problem. The carton can easily read as disciplined, controlled, maybe even cleaner to the average shopper who is trying to make a smarter dessert decision. But when a product needs water, fiber systems, sugar alcohols, glycerin, and fat substitutions to imitate the emotional role of real ice cream, while changing the carb math, what you are buying is a formulation project. Again, if that is what you want, make that choice with open eyes. But trust, especially in a category that trades on comfort and simplicity, should rise when the product gets easier to understand, not when it gets harder. CarbSmart asks you to trust the promise on the front more than the complexity on the back. That is exactly backwards. The third one is Halo Top Vanilla Bean, and this is where some people are going to disagree, which is fine, because disagreement is useful if it sharpens the standard. Halo Top is honest about being light ice cream. It is not pretending to be a 5-ingredient farmhouse pint. But the reason I still would not place it in the trust bucket is because this brand built enormous consumer confidence around the idea that you were finally beating the usual ice cream trade-off. You could have indulgence, high protein appeal, lower calories, and a kind of guilt-managed pleasure all in one pint. That story was incredibly powerful. It also pushed a lot of shoppers to stop asking the most basic question: what does this actually need to be made this way? Then you look closer. Ultra-filtered skim milk, soluble corn fiber, erythritol, cream, sugar, vegetable glycerine, egg yolks, inulin, stabilizers, flavor support. That is not a simple dessert with a lighter touch. It is a highly constructed system trying to preserve sweetness, body, and scoopability while changing the usual ice cream math. If you buy it knowingly as a macro-managed frozen dessert, fair enough. But if you buy it because the brand trained you to associate low calorie with a cleaner or more trustworthy product, that is where the category gets slippery. The issue is not that Halo Top exists. The issue is that a lot of shoppers learn to feel virtuous around it without learning to read it. Pause on that for a second, because this is where the aisle stops making sense. The products that sound most disciplined are not always the ones with the simplest formulation, and the products that sound most indulgent are not always the least honest. In ice cream, moral language can hide ingredient reality in both directions. The fourth brand I would be cautious with is Edie's, or Dreyer's, depending on where you shop. This is a classic example of legacy trust, carrying more weight than the ingredient story deserves. People recognize the name, recognize the freezer footprint, recognize the family carton familiarity, and assume they know what they are getting. But when you look at something like French vanilla or vanilla bean from this line, you start seeing a formula that leans hard on skim milk, corn syrup, sugar, coconut oil, whey, and cream, farther down than many shoppers would expect, plus gums and texture management. That is a very different emotional picture from the one most people have in their head when they hear a long-established ice cream name. This is not about one ingredient being inherently offensive. It is about what the overall build communicates. When coconut oil and whey start helping carry the structure in a product sold under the emotional banner of classic vanilla ice cream, the gap between image and formulation gets wider. The carton still promises tradition, the spoon still gives you sweetness and cold comfort. But if your standard for trust is, does this product clearly behave like the kind of ice cream it visually suggests, this is where the answer gets shaky. It is a category veteran, yes, but shelf longevity is not the same as formulation honesty. The fifth is Friendly's Vanilla Bean. And this one lands here, because it is one of the best examples of how friendly, familiar, family-centered branding can soften scrutiny. The vanilla bean version uses milk fat and non-fat milk, sugar, corn syrup, sweet cream buttermilk, whey, vanilla components, and a set of gums and emulsifiers to round out texture. Again, not a crime, but if you say vanilla bean ice cream to the average shopper, they are picturing something calmer than that. They are picturing creaminess led by dairy, sweetness carried with restraint, vanilla carrying the profile, and the whole thing feeling like an actual classic, rather than a reconstructed memory of one. What keeps it out of the trust group for me is the way the branding pre-sells comfort. It encourages people to stop their audit too early. This happens all over the store. Cartoons, nostalgia, warm colors, old diner energy, family language. Those things are not meaningless decorations. They are trust accelerators, and once you understand that, you start realizing how many shoppers are buying the feeling of an honest dessert before they have checked whether the formulation really supports that feeling. Friendly's is not the most extreme example in the aisle. It is one of the most instructive. So that is the caution side. Blue Bunny Soft Vanilla, Breyer's Carb Smart Vanilla, Halo Top Vanilla Bean, Edie's or Dreyer's Classic Vanilla offerings, and Friendly's Vanilla Bean. Notice the pattern. These are not all bad for the same reason. Some are too engineered to deserve the simplicity halo. Some borrow tradition while relying on a more padded formulation. Some win shoppers over with wellness language. Some win them over with familiarity. But they all trigger the same problem. They encourage trust that should have been earned more clearly. Now here is the good news. The category is not broken. There are still brands that, when you flip the carton over, calm the situation down. The label starts making sense. The ingredients stop fighting the story. The texture you imagine is closer to the texture you are buying. And that is where the freezer aisle gets a lot easier. The first brand I would put in the actually great group is Turkey Hill Simply Natural Vanilla Bean. Not every Turkey Hill product belongs in the same conversation, which is another reminder to audit the carton in front of you, not the logo in your memory. But the Simply Natural Vanilla Bean version is exactly the kind of product that restores trust. Because the ingredient list reads like a normal human dessert. Non-fat milk, cream, sugar, vanilla, vanilla bean. That is the kind of simplicity shoppers think they are getting far more often than they actually are. And simplicity here is not just aesthetic, it changes the whole consumer experience. The product does not need a giant supporting cast to explain its existence. The vanilla bean claim does not need to hide behind a dozen texturizers. The dairy identity stays visible. Even if it is not the most luxurious ice cream on earth, it respects the basic contract better than a lot of bigger, louder cartons do. That matters. Trust is not only about premium status. Sometimes it is about restraint. Sometimes it is about a company letting vanilla be vanilla. The second brand that earns real confidence is Tillamook, specifically old-fashioned vanilla. This one is useful because it shows what a middle ground success looks like. Not every trustworthy ice cream has to be stripped down to 4 ingredients and sold in a tiny premium pint. Tillamook's old-fashioned vanilla still uses a couple of gums, but the ingredient deck stays coherent. Cream, skim milk, milk, sugar, pasteurized egg yolks, vanilla extract, with tarragon and guar gum supporting texture. That is a very different kind of label than the ones leaning on corn syrup, coconut oil, glycerin, or fiber engineering. And you can feel the difference in what the product is trying to be. It is not trying to cosplay as health food. It is not trying to game softness. It is not trying to stretch nostalgia over a formula that does not support it. It is a rich grocery store vanilla ice cream that still reads like dairy first, sugar second, flavor third, structure last. That order matters. When the backbone of a dessert is visible, you trust it more. Tillamook is not perfect, because no large grocery product is above trade-offs, but it is honest about what it is, and that counts for a lot. The third one is Häagen-Dazs Vanilla, or Vanilla Bean. This is the brand a lot of people bring up first in these conversations, and for once the reputation is not built on nothing. One of the strongest signals of trust in this category is when a brand leaves very little room for confusion. Cream, skim milk, cane sugar, egg yolks, vanilla extract, or in the vanilla bean version, ground vanilla beans. That is a small, legible list. You do not need a decoder ring. You do not need the brand's mood board. You do not need to tell yourself a story about balance or better-for-you indulgence. It is simply a rich ice cream, made from ingredients that sound like ice cream ingredients. Now, is it expensive? Yes. Is it the only good choice? No. But it earns its higher trust status because it does not force you to negotiate with the label. When a product is premium, the back panel should get clearer, not murkier. Häagen-Dazs usually understands that. It is one of the few mainstream freezer staples where the simplicity is not a fantasy created by typography. It is actually there. That is why it remains a benchmark. The fourth is Strauss Organic Vanilla Bean. This is where transparency starts to feel almost quiet. No hype language needed. No fake toughness, no health halo gymnastics. Strauss builds its vanilla bean ice cream from organic cream and milk, organic cane sugar, organic egg yolks, organic vanilla extract, and organic ground vanilla bean. That is the kind of ingredient list that immediately lowers the noise level in your head. The brand is not asking you to believe in a miracle. It is asking you to read, understand, and decide. And that is a major point in its favor. A trustworthy food brand does not need to overpower you emotionally. It just needs to stop making you work so hard to figure out what is real. Strauss feels like a product made by people who understand that dairy quality and formulation clarity are already enough of a story. The organic angle will matter to some shoppers more than others. But even if you strip that away, what remains is solid. A coherent vanilla ice cream that behaves like the label says it should. The fifth brand in the Actually Great group is Van Leeuwen Vanilla Bean. This one earns its place because it shows how premium can still be readable. Milk, cream, cane sugar, egg yolks, vanilla extract, salt, vanilla bean. That is it. You can disagree on whether it is worth the price. You can decide it is too rich for your taste. You can prefer a bigger tub for family use. All of that is fair. But trust is not the same as affordability, and it is not the same as personal preference. Trust, in this conversation, means the product clearly tells you what it is, and then tastes built from that truth rather than from a maze of compensation tactics. Van Leeuwen also deserves credit for something a lot of premium brands forget. Simplicity should not feel like a marketing costume. Here, it feels structural. You can see how the richness would happen. You can understand how the texture would hold together. The product does not need to lean on an identity sermon about purity, because the label already makes the case. That is what shoppers are really looking for, even if they do not always say it that way. And if you notice what these better examples have in common, the lesson becomes easy to carry into any freezer aisle. The stronger brands do not ask you to trust a mood. They ask you to trust a formulation that you can actually follow. The ingredient list is shorter or at least more coherent. Dairy leads the story. The texture support, if present, feels secondary rather than foundational. The vanilla claim sounds believable. The product name matches the product strategy. That is the checklist. So here is the practical audit you can use the next time you are staring at 30 frozen cartons and wondering which one deserves a spot in your cart. First, read the actual product name before you read anything else. If the front says frozen dairy dessert, light ice cream, keto style, carb smart, or something that sounds more like a framework than a food, pause. Ask what had to change to make that promise work. Second, scan the first 5 ingredients and look for the backbone. If dairy, sugar, egg yolks, and vanilla are doing the heavy lifting, good sign. If the core starts getting crowded by corn syrup, coconut oil, whey, glycerin, fiber systems, or sugar alcohols, you are no longer in simple vanilla territory, no matter how calm the packaging looks. Third, treat vanilla bean specs as evidence only when the rest of the label agrees. Specs alone are not honesty. They are decoration until proven otherwise. Fourth, ask whether the brand is selling you comfort, discipline, nostalgia, or premium status. Then check whether the back panel supports that exact story. And fifth, remember that a giant familiar brand can still lose the trust test on a specific carton, while a smaller or quieter brand can win it. That, more than anything, is the deeper truth of ice cream. The best buying decisions usually happen when you stop shopping by emotional shortcut. Not because emotion is bad, but because food branding knows exactly how to use it. It knows how to make homemade feel safer than it is. It knows how to make light feel cleaner than it is. It knows how to make soft feel more indulgent. It knows how to make family favorite feel like proof. And once you see that, a lot of the aisle becomes easier to decode. So if you want the shortest version of this whole video, it is this. The more an ice cream has to explain itself with concepts, the more carefully you should read it. The more it can explain itself with actual ingredients, the more confidence it usually deserves. Now I want to hear from you. Which ice cream brand in your freezer has earned your trust, and which one lost it the second you turned the carton around? If there is a brand you think belongs on either side of this list, drop it in the comments, and if you want the next audit to be yogurt, coffee creamer, frozen pizza, peanut butter, Or protein bars, say that too. Because the fastest way to shop smarter is to stop letting the front of the package tell the whole story.